Have you ever felt that sudden sting when someone cuts you down in front of others? Maybe it was a careless joke at your expense, or a sarcastic remark that left the room laughing while you sat there with a quiet ache in your chest. In that moment, it's not just the words that hurt, it's the invisible weight of being dismissed, of feeling small when you know you are not. I've seen how these moments unfold. Some people use disrespect like a cheap trick, believing that by making you look weak, they somehow appear stronger. And if we're not careful, we hand them the stage while our silence turns into shame. But here's the truth. Respect cannot be begged for, nor can it be forced. It's not about shouting louder or proving yourself to those who never intended to see your worth. Respect begins with how you hold yourself when the ground shakes beneath you. Calmness becomes your armor, composure your sword. So the question is this: how do you transform a moment meant to belittle you into one that commands respect? Stay with me and let's step into the answer together. As we step into the first chapter, imagine the air of a crowded room, voices overlapping, the hum of ambition everywhere. You see faces scanning the space, searching for who matters and who does not. In that atmosphere, a single gesture can speak louder than an entire speech. One person rises with steady presence, hand firm, eyes clear. Another remains seated, distracted, offering only a quick nod. Without a word, respect is given or withheld. The moment slips by, but its weight lingers. Now, picture yourself in that very scene. Someone approaches, extending their hand with intention. Do you rise? Do you meet their gaze? Or do you shrink into the chair as though the moment belongs to someone else? Respect is not always won in grand displays. Often it lives in the small choices, the way you stand, the way you acknowledge another's humanity, the way you carry the silent banner of your own worth. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. The body follows. The smallest actions betray the deepest beliefs." Let me share what I once saw at a professional gathering. The goal was networking, yet what struck me most had nothing to do with polished speeches or dazzling introductions. There was a man who rose every single time, whether greeting a senior executive or simply thanking the waiter pouring coffee. He made eye contact. His tone was grounded. There was no showmanship in him, no hunger to impress. And yet, he commanded the room. People remembered him, not for his words, but for the way his presence spoke of sincerity. His posture carried weight. His actions whispered confidence. He never had to declare his value. It was already evident. In contrast, another guest stayed seated throughout. He did not mean to slight anyone, it was simply habit. But the room felt the difference. Subconsciously, people drew a line. They took him less seriously, though his talent was not inferior. His silence in that one moment became louder than anything he could say later. The truth was clear. Standing is not mere politeness. It is recognition. It is a declaration of equality. It is saying, without words, I see you, and I see myself as worthy of this exchange. Here's where Stoic wisdom enters. The Stoics never wasted energy on what was outside their control. They taught the discipline of mastering what is closest to us, our body, our tone, our choices. You cannot control whether the world honors you, but you can control the way you carry yourself. That is the battlefield you never surrender. To rise when someone extends their hand is not about pleasing them, it is about respecting yourself enough to act with intention. Epictetus reminded us, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. The act must precede the respect, not the other way around. Consider the weight of first impressions. They are not fragile things. They endure. A careless moment plants doubt that no argument can erase. A deliberate gesture plants strength that no criticism can uproot. Respect flows from the seed of how you show up. To stand when others approach, to meet their eyes as if the moment matters. These are not empty courtesies. They are acts of inner discipline. They are proof that you do not drift through life unconscious. Think of it like a warrior sharpening his blade each morning. The blade may not be needed today, but the act itself tells him who he is. Every greeting, every handshake, every rising from your seat is the sharpening of your character. It signals that you live awake, not asleep. People sense it. They may not name it, but they feel it, and they respond with respect. So, when you walk into a room, ask yourself, will I shrink or will I rise? Will I let habit decide my worth, or will I choose intention? The Stoics would say, act with purpose, for life is too brief to waste on careless gestures. Stand. Look. Be present. Respect is not given to the loudest voice, but to the one who carries quiet strength. And when the next hand extends toward you, remember this truth. In that single movement of rising, you are not only greeting another person, you are greeting yourself, the version of you that refuses to live small. That moment becomes your declaration. I am here. I am worthy. I act with intention. And from there, respect follows naturally. This is the foundation, the first step in commanding respect without a single word of demand. Now that we've seen how small actions can speak louder than speeches, let us move forward into the next lesson: what to do when someone tries to silence you, when your voice is interrupted, and the test of your composure begins. Moving into the second chapter, let us step into a moment most of us know too well. You are speaking, perhaps telling a story, perhaps explaining a point that matters to you. The words are flowing, the room is listening, and then suddenly someone cuts across your voice. Their interruption shatters the rhythm, and all eyes shift. For a second, you feel the weight of frustration rise in your chest. The instinct is to fight back, to snap, to seize the floor with sharper words. But pause here, because this is the exact point where respect is either strengthened or lost. Now imagine the silence that follows. Not a silence of weakness, but of strength. Instead of meeting noise with noise, you simply stop. You turn toward the interrupter, meeting their eyes with a calm, steady gaze. No anger, no flinch, just presence. The room feels it. The seconds stretch long, and those watching sense something shift. The one who interrupted realizes the weight of their intrusion without you needing to explain. Respect begins to return, not through aggression, but through composure. This is where Stoic philosophy guides us. Epictetus taught that true strength lies not in controlling others, but in mastering yourself. The interruption is outside your control, but your response, that belongs entirely to you. Anger may feel natural, but anger is a chain. To break it, you must choose stillness. A gaze held steady becomes sharper than any retort. A pause becomes a wall no one can ignore. In that restraint, you reveal who commands the space. I remember a family dinner where this truth became clear. I was in the middle of telling a story, light-hearted, filled with laughter, when a relative barged in, cutting me off with their own tale. At first, I stumbled. The urge to push back burned hot. But then I remembered the discipline I had practiced. I stopped. I looked at them, calm, patient, waiting. The silence was brief, but it weighed more than any rebuttal. Their face shifted, the realization dawning. They trailed off, embarrassed. With a simple nod, they yielded, and I continued. The rest of the table leaned back toward me. Respect had been restored, without a single sharp word. Here lies the paradox. In moments where we are interrupted, we believe we must shout louder to be heard. Yet the opposite is true. The quieter you become, the more undeniable your presence. Composure unsettles those who expect chaos. Calmness demands attention because it is rare. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." To stay composed in the face of disrespect is to hold that power in your hands. So how do we practice this discipline? Begin with the body. When interrupted, do not fidget, do not shrink, do not rush. Sit tall, hold your gaze, let silence be your shield. Then, when the space clears, return to your words with calm certainty. You might say, "Let me continue where I left off." Simple, firm, respectful. You do not need to shame the other person. You only need to assert your right to be heard. This is not about winning an argument. It is about setting an expectation. Respect in conversation is not negotiable. And when others see you enforce it without anger, they recognize a deeper strength. They see someone who cannot be rattled, who cannot be dragged into petty battles, who knows their worth. Think of it like a flame in the wind. The wildfire flares up when disturbed, burning out quickly. The steady flame bends but does not break. It continues to shine, quietly, persistently, until the wind itself dies down. Which flame do you want to be? The Stoic chooses the steady flame. Every interruption is a test, not of your voice, but of your presence. Fail the test, and you reveal insecurity. Pass it, and you show mastery. And in mastery lies respect. People may forget the story you were telling, but they will remember the way you carried yourself when challenged. So the next time someone tries to cut across your words, do not lose yourself in noise. Stand firm. Hold your gaze. Let the silence press its weight. And when you speak again, let it be with calm authority. In that moment, you will not only regain respect, you will embody it. From here, we move into another trial of composure. Not when someone interrupts you, but when they seek to humiliate you outright, turning your pain into their joke. That is where the Stoic discipline sharpens further, transforming mockery into a stage for strength. Advancing to the third chapter, imagine a circle of friends gathered in familiar warmth. The table is alive with stories, laughter rising and falling like waves against the shore. You feel at ease, protected by belonging. Then, without warning, someone cuts into that comfort. They reach back into your past, pull out an embarrassing memory, and lay it on the table as a joke. The laughter that follows is sharp, echoing louder than you expect. But for you, it does not sound like joy. It sounds like a blade. Your face flushes. The pulse in your throat quickens. Your chest feels tight, as if dignity itself is under siege. Instinct screams for retaliation. You want to strike back, to say something crueler, sharper, stronger. But the Stoics remind us, instinct is not destiny. Epictetus wrote, "What disturbs men's minds is not events, but their judgments about events. The insult itself is powerless. The true danger lies in the meaning you give it." I have lived such a moment. At a reunion years ago, an old classmate retold a story of mine, one I had buried long ago. It painted me foolish. The laughter was immediate, almost overwhelming. In my gut, a fire rose. I wanted to burn him with words. But then I paused. I remembered the principle. What does not harm your essence is not worth your concern. So I smiled, steady, and asked, "Would you repeat that?" The laughter stopped like a wheel losing momentum. He stumbled. Forced to repeat, the joke sounded hollow, stripped of surprise. What had landed with force now collapsed into awkwardness. The group, once entertained, now shifted uncomfortably. Respect, which had seemed lost, began to return. I had not raised my voice. I had not fought. I had simply refused to yield. This is the power of composure. Humiliation only thrives when you surrender to it. Expose it calmly, and it withers. Ask for repetition, and the sting dissolves. The mocker is left revealed, not you. And in that moment, you prove that your worth does not bend to cheap laughter. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength when mocked. Strength is not found in retaliation. It's not found in silence, soaked with shame. It's found in calmness. It's found in choosing not to let another person's words dictate your state. An insult is like a shadow on water. It distorts for a moment, then fades if you let it. But if you stand rooted, the wind passes, and you remain. So it is with humiliation. It is only air. What matters is whether you let it move you. I once knew a woman who learned this truth. In meetings, a colleague mocked her relentlessly, disguising cruelty as humor. At first, she defended herself. She tried to outwit him, but every exchange only fueled his arrogance. Then she shifted. When interrupted, she stopped speaking. She looked at him calmly and said nothing. The silence grew heavy. Eventually she asked him to repeat himself. He faltered. The room turned, and from that day forward, the mockery ceased. She had won not through attack, but through poise. This is the Stoic way. Dignity does not demand. It demonstrates. Respect does not beg. It radiates from within. Every time you remain calm, you train yourself to stand taller. Every time you refuse to be pulled into petty games, you remind the world and yourself that your value is untouchable. But let me be clear. Composure is not passivity. It is active mastery. It takes courage to hold silence when the room laughs. It takes discipline to smile when your pride aches. It takes strength to let another expose themselves while you remain whole. That is not weakness, it is sovereignty. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." Bravery here is not found in fighting every insult. It is found in refusing to let insults chain you. True freedom is the power to remain unbroken when others seek to break you. So, how do we practice this? First, pause. Let the insult settle without rushing to meet it. Second, use silence, not as surrender, but as space. Space for the mocker to hear their own ugliness. Space for others to notice the imbalance. And third, when you do respond, keep it calm, keep it brief. A simple request for repetition, spoken with composure, can shift an entire room. Remember, the room is always watching, not just the words spoken, but the way you hold yourself in the face of those words. When you stay calm, you win something greater than the moment. You win trust, you win respect, and above all, you win mastery over yourself. So carry this with you. When someone tries to cut you down with laughter, know this. You hold the pen to the story's final line. If you stay grounded, their attempt collapses under its own weight. If you lose yourself, you hand them victory. The choice is always yours. Let this truth settle deep. Humiliation loses its power in the face of calmness. Disrespect crumbles when confronted with composure, and respect, true respect, flows back to the one who refuses to be moved. And as we turn the page, prepare for the next trial. For jokes disguised as cruelty are one thing, But what happens when the strike is sharper? When the words are aimed not to amuse, but to provoke anger? That is where the Stoic path grows even more demanding, and that is where we go next. Moving into the fourth chapter, picture yourself seated at a family table. The dishes are warm, the chatter is light, and then, like a blade slipped under the ribs, someone delivers a pointed remark. A failure of yours, dragged into the open, old pain pressed into fresh skin. You feel the eyes of the room turn, waiting, watching, measuring your worth not by your past, but by how you will respond in this very moment. The heart races. The instinct rises to defend, to explain, to wrestle for dignity. But Stoicism teaches another way. Epictetus whispered across time, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And here is the truth. The provocation itself is powerless. The words only cut as deeply as you permit. So, imagine this instead. You pause, you breathe, you let the silence expand long enough to remind yourself who holds the reins. Then, with calmness so disarming it feels almost unreal, you say, "Does anyone know a good bakery nearby? I was thinking of picking something up for next time." A simple shift, an unexpected question, and the energy in the room fractures. The aggressor falters, confused by your composure. The conversation drifts, the sting dissolves, and suddenly the dagger has no edge. This is not escape, it is mastery. You did not dodge the moment, you transformed it. You proved that provocation cannot dictate the state of your soul. Seneca wrote that anger is temporary madness. To answer insult with anger is to let the instigator write your script. To answer with composure is to reclaim authorship of your own story. I have witnessed this play out. A friend once told me of a dinner where a relative mocked his stalled career in front of everyone. He could have erupted. Instead, he smiled and asked if anyone had seen the new cafe that opened nearby. The tension collapsed. The mocker was left exposed, not because of counterattack, but because calmness revealed the pettiness of their strike. Later, several guests came to him privately, saying they admired how he carried himself. He left the table with something far greater than victory. He left with respect. Understand this. When you shift a conversation with ease, you send a message. You will not be baited. You will not be dragged into mud by someone who thrives on chaos. Your peace is not for sale. And when others witness this, their admiration grows, not for clever words, but for steady presence. True strength is not measured in how loudly you respond, but in how little you need to. Of course, the technique itself must flow naturally. Forced humor or obvious deflection will fall flat. The power lies in subtlety. Choose a question that feels organic, about food, about a nearby place, about something neutral. Delivered calmly, it becomes a lever that moves the whole room. It derails hostility without confrontation. It cuts sharper than anger because it reveals that your center cannot be shaken. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This practice is that realization in motion. You cannot stop others from speaking, but you can decide what those words mean. You can decide where to lead the energy of the moment, and that decision is where your strength lives. So let me ask you, how often have you surrendered power because you felt compelled to answer every jab? How many times have you given away dignity for the temporary satisfaction of retaliation? What if, instead, you chose the higher ground? What if you let silence and a subtle redirection become your shield? In doing so, you transform not just the moment, but yourself. Each time you practice this, you build long-term resilience. It is not merely about one family dinner, one comment, one room full of eyes. It is about forging a habit of unshakable control. Every provocation becomes training. Every insult becomes an opportunity. The more you practice, the more natural it feels. And soon, no voice can dictate your peace. You become untouchable. And here's the beauty of it. Others will notice. They may not always say it aloud, but respect grows in silence. People lean toward those who remain calm under fire. They trust those who do not flinch. They remember those who respond with grace instead of rage. Your presence becomes your power. So the next time you are tested, pause, breathe, smile if you can. Then, with deliberate ease, redirect the current. You will watch the storm collapse under its own weight. And you will stand firm, unharmed, untouched. That is command. That is respect. If this speaks to you, write calm strength in the comments. Let it be your quiet declaration. And if you seek more wisdom like this, subscribe so you never walk unarmed into the storms of daily life. From here, we move into the final lesson. What happens when the wisest choice is not to stand your ground, but to walk away entirely? What does it mean to leave not in defeat, but in dignity? This is where our journey turns to its ultimate test, the power of absence over presence. Advancing to the 5th chapter, imagine the hollow silence of a meeting room where every word you offer is brushed aside, where your effort is not only unseen, but mocked. You sit among colleagues, but it feels as though you are invisible, as though your presence is little more than a shadow cast against the wall. The weight of being undervalued is not loud, it is corrosive. It erodes the edges of your confidence until you begin to question whether your worth has somehow vanished. Yet, here is the paradox. In those very moments when you are ignored or diminished, the power to reclaim dignity lies not in fighting harder to be heard, but in choosing to step away. Now imagine Sarah, a woman I once knew, an exceptional creative mind. She poured herself into a major project, staying late, shaping ideas, carrying more than her share of the load. But instead of being honored, she was ridiculed. Her manager interrupted her mid-sentence, dismissed her contributions with a smirk, and left her standing small before her peers. For months, Sarah told herself to endure. She tried harder, thinking that respect was something earned only through relentless effort. But each attempt to prove herself was met with indifference, as though her voice were a note drowned out in a storm. Then came the day that broke the pattern. In yet another meeting, she offered an idea, clear, thoughtful, valuable. Once again it was brushed aside. This time, Sarah did not argue. She did not raise her voice or bend herself into more effort. Instead, she closed her laptop with quiet finality, rose from her chair and said, "I'll put my energy where it will be valued." The room froze. She walked out without a tremor in her voice. That same day, she resigned, not in anger, not in defeat, but in preservation of her dignity. Months later, she joined another company, this time in a leadership role, celebrated not only for her talent, but for her refusal to let others diminish her worth. This is the lesson of walking away. It is not surrender, it is strength. Seneca wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." To remain where your value is denied is to let others chip away at your spirit. To leave is to declare that your worth is non-negotiable. Walking away is not abandoning the fight. It is choosing the right battlefield. Ask yourself, how many times have you stayed in rooms where respect was absent, telling yourself it would come if only you tried harder? How many hours, how many years have been given to proving what should never need to be proven? The Stoics remind us, respect arises only when you honor yourself first. And sometimes the clearest way to honor yourself is to refuse to remain where your dignity is denied. The beauty of walking away lies in its silence. It is not drama, it is not rage, it is a quiet but unyielding decision. It is the voice within whispering, "I am worth more than this." Marcus Aurelius urged himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." You cannot control how others treat you, but you can control where you invest your presence. To stay in a place of disrespect is to hand others the pen to write your story. To leave is to reclaim authorship. Consider the truth hidden in absence. Presence can be diminished, mocked, ignored, but absence, true absence, can carry more weight than words ever could. When you step away from a table that refused to see your worth, the silence you leave behind becomes its own statement. Your absence is felt more strongly than your diminished presence ever was. In that space, respect often awakens, but by then you have already moved forward, investing your energy where it will grow instead of wither. But how do you know when the time has come? The signs are quiet but clear. When every effort you make is met with indifference, when you find yourself shrinking, fighting simply to be recognized as human, when your voice becomes something you hardly recognize because it bends too often for peace, that is when you must pause and listen. The Stoics call us to discern between what we can and cannot control. You cannot control the hearts of those unwilling to see you. You cannot force their recognition, but you can control your choice to stay or to leave. Walking away is not weakness. It is a boundary drawn in fire. It says, "I will not trade my dignity for proximity. I will not diminish myself to fit into spaces too small for my worth." Epictetus taught, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." In walking away, some will call you fragile, some will call you rash. But you will know the truth, that you preserved what was most sacred, your self-respect. Think of Sarah again. When she left, her colleagues were stunned. Some even mocked her departure. But months later, when they saw her thriving elsewhere, celebrated for the brilliance they once overlooked, the lesson struck them harder than any speech could. Her absence became her voice. Her silence became her strength. So let this settle deep within you. Respect is built by how you treat yourself. Stay where you are diminished, and you teach others your dignity is for sale. If you walk, you teach them that your worth is untouchable. The quiet act of leaving becomes a thunderclap, echoing long after you've closed the door. And when you face that moment, remember, walking away does not mean you lost. It means you chose a greater victory. The victory of honoring your own soul above the noise of those who could not see it. Sometimes, the most powerful action you can take is not to fight harder, but to stand, to turn, and to leave the table where your worth is not recognized. From here, the path of Stoicism sharpens. Once you've learned to leave what diminishes you, the question deepens. How do you build a life where respect is not fleeting, but constant? How do you root yourself so firmly in self-worth that no dismissal can shake you? That is the step ahead, one shaped not in public battles, but in private discipline, when no one is watching. Respect can be won in moments of fire, through presence, composure, silence, or the courage to walk away. Yet lasting respect is forged elsewhere. It is not only about what you do when tested, it is about the foundation you build when no challenge stands before you. Respect that endures is born from habits, choices, and principles that set the rhythm of your days. So let us stand now in the quiet after the storm. The question is no longer how to win respect in the moment, but how to carry it across a lifetime. To command respect once is strength. To embody it continually, that is mastery. Now imagine a river. At its source, it is nothing more than a trickle, overlooked, dismissed, even stepped over. Yet, as it flows, as it continues without pause, it carves valleys, feeds cities, and shapes landscapes. Respect works the same way. It is not built on single moments, but on the steady current of consistency. People may be impressed by a spark, but they follow the fire that never goes out. Here's where Stoic philosophy grounds us. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." Respect is not held together by declarations. It is sustained by repetition, by the quiet reliability of action aligned with principle. When your words match your deeds, when your behavior today echoes your behavior yesterday, others begin to trust the pattern, and trust is the foundation of lasting respect. I recall a man I once worked with, quiet, unassuming, never the loudest voice in the room, but he showed up the same way every day, calm, reliable. He delivered what he promised. He did not need to remind people of his worth. His worth reminded them of him. Slowly, almost invisibly, his presence commanded attention, not because of brilliance in one moment, but because of steadiness across hundreds of moments. When crisis struck, people turned to him instinctively. They knew he would not waver. Consistency is not glamour. It rarely earns applause in the short term. But it is the stone path people will walk upon when chaos surrounds them. The Stoics valued constancy above cleverness because they knew that storms reveal who can be relied upon. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. To waste yourself is to live scattered, unpredictable, chasing impressions rather than building a foundation. To live stoically is to let your life become a structure that does not shift with every gust of wind." Think of it in your own life. Have you ever noticed how quickly respect erodes when someone's actions contradict their words? A leader who preaches discipline but cannot master himself. A friend who promises loyalty but disappears in difficulty. The disappointment is deeper than anger because inconsistency shatters trust. Conversely, when someone is steady, even in small things, their respect compounds. A person who keeps their word in minor matters earns belief in greater ones. Consistency does not mean rigidity. It is not being unmovable like a stone that resists all change. It is being like the seasons, adaptable but dependable. You may shift, you may grow, but your core remains visible. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That saying is the architecture of consistency. Declare your foundation, then live it again and again until no one doubts the shape of your character. Let me share another story. A young woman I mentored once struggled with respect at her workplace. She was talented, but she tried to prove herself by taking on everything, always rushing, always saying yes. At first, people admired her energy, but soon they stopped respecting her boundaries. Her overpromising led to mistakes. Her inconsistency eroded trust. She felt invisible again, despite her effort. I told her, "Stop scattering. Choose a rhythm. Deliver what you promise, no more, no less." Over time, as she aligned her actions with clear commitments, the perception changed. Her colleagues began to rely on her. Respect returned, not because she was the loudest, but because she was the most consistent. This is the secret. Respect does not live in dramatic gestures, but in the quiet repetition of principle. It is the father who shows up every evening, not the one who dazzles once with a gift. It is the friend who keeps small confidences, not the one who makes loud declarations of loyalty. It is the leader who acts with fairness in minor matters, so that when weighty decisions come, his word is trusted. Consistency demands sacrifice. It means refusing shortcuts that might win attention today, but cost trust tomorrow. It means disciplining your emotions so they do not rewrite your values. It means choosing principle over impulse. The Stoics did not ask us to be flawless. They asked us to be faithful to our word, to our values, to our path. So how do you cultivate this? Begin small. Keep one promise to yourself each day. It may be as simple as rising at the time you set, or finishing the task you said you would. Do this daily, and you teach yourself that your word matters. Extend this to others. When you commit, follow through, even if no one would notice if you didn't. In this, you craft the invisible architecture of respect. Respect sustained by consistency becomes unshakable. Others may doubt your talent. They may question your choices, but they cannot deny your reliability. And in a world full of noise, reliability is gold. It is the quiet power that outlasts charisma, outlasts ambition, outlasts charm. When you are consistent, you do not need to demand respect. It finds you. Here's where the Stoic heart burns brightest. Consistency is not about controlling others. It is about mastering yourself so fully that others see in you a reflection of stability they crave. In the chaos of life, the one who stands steady becomes the anchor. Respect flows not to the loudest, but to the most grounded. And so, let this truth echo. Respect born of consistency is not immediate, but it is permanent. Do not chase the applause of moments. Build the trust of years. Be steady in word, in action, in presence. Let your life whisper the same truth again and again. I can be counted on. From here, the path leads us to another dimension of respect. Not just how consistently you act, but how powerfully you choose your words. For the next test of commanding respect lies not in silence, but in the weight carried by every phrase you release. Moving into the second chapter, imagine words like stones dropped into still water. Some sink quietly, leaving little behind. Others crash, sending ripples that carry across the entire surface. This is the weight of language. Respect does not live only in how you stand or how you walk away. It lives also in how you speak. A single phrase can build trust. A careless word can undo years of effort. And in a world where so many rush to fill silence with noise, the one who learns to speak with intention stands apart. Think of the times you have sat in a room where one person commanded attention without raising their voice. They did not need to speak often, but when they did, everyone leaned in. Why? Because their words carried weight. They had learned the Stoic art of restraint, knowing that silence is not emptiness, but preparation. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Respect for your voice begins with respect for silence. I once worked with a leader whose authority was not born from titles, but from presence. In meetings, others would rush to share their opinions, stacking words on top of each other like cluttered stones. He, however, would listen. His face revealed little, his patience unbroken. Then, at the right moment, he would speak only a few sentences. But those sentences reshaped the entire discussion. His restraint gave power to his words. People remembered them because he chose them with care. That is the kind of speaking that commands respect. The Stoics knew that words are never neutral. Seneca warned that speech is the mirror of the soul. What we say reveals who we are, far more than what we claim about ourselves. This is why Stoic practice places such value on measured speech. To rush, to ramble, to explain endlessly is to leak power. To pause, to speak with precision, is to concentrate it. Let me offer another image. Imagine your words as arrows. If you fire without aim, you empty your quiver quickly, and no one feels the impact. But if you draw slowly, take aim, and release with intention, the arrow finds its mark. So too with speech. The person who feels compelled to answer every slight, every question, every silence, with more words, reveals insecurity. The one who chooses carefully, who knows when not to speak, earns respect without demanding it. There was once a colleague who tried constantly to impress. In every discussion he rushed to prove his intelligence, speaking over others, filling the air with elaborate explanations. At first people humored him, but soon his voice became background noise, ignored even when he had something valuable to say. Another co-worker, quieter, rarely spoke at all, but when she did, her words were distilled clarity. People remembered her contributions. She was the one others looked to, not because she said the most, but because she wasted nothing. This is the discipline of speech the Stoics encourage. Speak less, but with intention. Let your words serve as tools, not ornaments. Do not apologize unnecessarily. Do not explain what needs no explanation. Do not try to decorate truth with endless flourishes. Let your speech reflect your values, direct, calm, steady. Marcus Aurelius advised himself, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." To live by that is to let your voice be trusted. But how do we practice this in daily life? Begin with restraint. When insulted, pause. When asked a question, give yourself a heartbeat before you respond. When you speak, cut away the excess. Say what needs to be said, nothing more, nothing less. Over time, people begin to realize that when you speak, you are worth listening to, and respect follows naturally. There is also power in tone. A calm voice carries further than a loud one. The world assumes that volume equals strength, but the Stoics knew otherwise. True power is in control. A person who yells reveals they have lost mastery of themselves. A person who remains calm under provocation reveals strength greater than any shout could carry. I have seen heated arguments where one calm response ended the storm, not because it silenced the other, but because it revealed the futility of their noise. In this, your speech becomes a mirror of your discipline. Others may try to provoke, to drag you into noise, to pull you into endless justification. But you can choose not to play that game. Your silence unsettles them. Your measured response disarms them. Your presence commands them. And in the end, they respect what they cannot shake. Let us not forget, language builds legacy. The words you leave behind echo long after you depart the room. They shape how others remember you. Were you the one who spoke constantly yet left nothing behind? Or were you the one whose words cut through fog, remembered like lines carved into stone? The Stoics urge us to aim for the latter. Let our speech be brief, true, and necessary. So as you move forward, remember this: words are not free. Every phrase you release shapes the perception of who you are. Do not waste them. Speak with intention, with restraint, with clarity. And when you do, you will discover that respect does not need to be chased. It will come to you, drawn by the gravity of your voice. This is the second path, mastery of words as mastery of self. And from here, the journey turns again. For respect is not only sustained by what you say, but also by what you choose not to say, the quiet confidence that makes silence its own declaration. That is where we will go next. Advancing to the third chapter, picture a crowded room where voices overlap, where opinions clash, and yet your silence carries more weight than the noise around you. In that space, you do not need to prove yourself with endless arguments. You do not need to fight for every inch of recognition. Instead, your calm becomes a force of its own. This is the paradox. Silence, often mistaken for weakness, is in truth one of the greatest strengths you can wield. Now imagine a heated exchange. Someone throws words like daggers, their tone sharp, their body restless. Others lean in, expecting you to answer in kind, but you remain steady. You do not flinch. You let the storm swirl and then pass, untouched. And in that restraint you reveal something deeper than cleverness. You reveal control. Epictetus said, "If someone speaks ill of you, don't make excuses. Respond, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.'" The Stoics knew that silence could wound arrogance more deeply than words ever could. I recall a man I once knew in business. He was not the most charismatic, nor the loudest voice in the room. Rivals tried to provoke him, to draw him into battles of ego. He rarely answered. He would simply look, steady and unshaken, and wait. Days later, decisions tilted his way. Not because he won an argument, but because his composure unsettled everyone else. They trusted him more than those who fought for attention. His silence was not absence, it was presence magnified. We often think silence makes us smaller, but look deeper. Silence unsettles the aggressor because it denies them fuel. Silence strengthens you because it proves mastery over impulse. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You always own the option of having no opinion." Imagine the freedom in that. Not every remark deserves an answer. Not every challenge deserves your energy. By staying silent, you show that your worth is not determined by the noise of others. Think of silence as the mountain above the valley. The winds rush below, noisy and restless, but the peak remains still, unbothered. People respect the mountain not because it shouts, but because it endures. So it is with you. When others waste themselves in quarrels, your stillness reveals strength. Respect gathers around those who remain calm when the crowd cannot. Let me share another story. A young woman in a team meeting was often interrupted by a colleague who thrived on drama. Each time she spoke, he cut her off with sarcasm. At first, she defended herself, explaining, arguing, trying to win ground. But the more she argued, the less respect she earned. One day, she changed her approach. When interrupted, she stopped. She looked at him with steady eyes, said nothing, and waited. The silence pressed against him like a weight. He stumbled, filled the air with his own nervousness, until others began to notice the imbalance. Soon, the team leader asked her to continue. She spoke briefly, calmly, and the meeting moved forward. She had won, not by fighting, but by refusing to fight. This is the essence of Stoic silence. It is not retreat. It is not passivity. It is the active choice to conserve your strength for what truly matters. It is saying to yourself, "I decide what deserves my voice." In a culture addicted to noise, silence becomes rare and therefore powerful. But silence must be disciplined. It is not avoidance. It is not escape. It is measured, deliberate, purposeful. You stay silent not because you have nothing to say, but because you know that speaking would only diminish you. And when you do choose to speak, the contrast makes your words strike harder, remembered longer. Seneca warned, "Speech that flows without pause is a sign of an undisciplined mind." Restraint sharpens both silence and speech. Respect follows those who do not waste themselves. If you speak when every impulse tells you to, you scatter your energy. If you remain calm, you gather it. People sense this gathering. They feel the density of your presence. They notice the difference between those who must always respond and those who can choose not to. And choice, always choice, is what commands respect. Ask yourself, how many times have you weakened your position by rushing into defense, by answering insults with more words, by trying to prove yourself to someone unworthy of the effort? And how different would the outcome have been had you simply paused, stayed silent, let the moment reveal itself? Silence is not defeat. Silence is letting truth defend itself. From here, the lesson deepens. Silence teaches others where your boundaries lie. It shows them that you cannot be baited, cannot be dragged into their chaos. It forces them to confront their own noise. And in that mirror, they often falter. Meanwhile, you remain untouched. This is not easy. It demands inner strength, patience, and the courage to withstand discomfort. But the reward is immense. For when you master silence, you no longer fight for respect, you embody it. Others cannot help but feel it in your presence, in your restraint, in your refusal to be moved by what is beneath you. So let it be clear, silence is not the absence of strength, it is its refinement. To be calm when others rage, to be steady when others break, to be quiet when others beg for reaction. This is the mark of mastery. And once mastered, silence speaks louder than any voice. This is where respect begins to crystallize into power. And from here, we will move into another truth, that boundaries, clearly drawn and firmly held, amplify silence and turn respect into something unshakable. For silence without boundaries is only half a shield. Boundaries make it whole. From here, let us step into the fourth chapter, where silence alone is no longer enough. A wall of calm without shape eventually crumbles. To make it endure, you must carve boundaries. Boundaries are not cages, they are shields. They are the invisible lines that declare, this is where I end, and this is where you cannot cross. Without them, even the strongest silence can be mistaken for permission. Now imagine a house without doors. Anyone can enter, anyone can take, anyone can leave chaos in their wake. That is a life without boundaries. You may believe you are being generous, accommodating, patient, but in truth, you are leaving yourself unguarded. Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity." For he is not permitted to prove himself. Adversity often comes in the form of people pressing against your lines. If you have drawn none, you will never prove your worth, for you will never hold it. I remember a young man who gave everything to his friends and colleagues. He was the one who stayed late, who lent money, who always said yes. At first, people praised him for his kindness, but slowly, respect began to fade. His efforts were expected, not appreciated. When he finally said no, people were shocked, some even angry. Not because his refusal was wrong, but because he had trained them to believe his time, his energy, his dignity were theirs to command. By never drawing lines, he taught others to erase him. Contrast this with another story. A woman I worked with was clear, calm and firm about her limits. She did not raise her voice, she did not argue, but when someone pressed too far, she would simply say, "I can't take that on," or "That doesn't work for me." No excuses, no apologies. Over time, people learned not only to respect her boundaries, but to admire her for them. They knew where they stood with her, and in knowing, they trusted her. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If your thoughts say, "I am not worth defending," then your soul will fade into that color, and others will see it. But if your thoughts say, "I honor my time, I honor my dignity," then your life becomes dyed with strength. Boundaries are not selfishness. They are the visible proof that you respect yourself, and self-respect always precedes the respect of others. Boundaries need not be loud. In fact, the strongest boundaries are spoken in quiet firmness. A raised voice suggests you are still trying to convince yourself. A calm refusal shows you have already decided. This is where Stoicism guides us. Control your inner world, and the outer world adjusts around it. People may not like your boundaries, but they cannot deny them if you hold them steadily. Think of boundaries as the frame of a painting. Without the frame, the art bleeds off the canvas, shapeless and unprotected. With the frame, the art is honored, elevated, preserved. You are the canvas, your boundaries are the frame. Without them, the beauty of who you are spills into places where it can be trampled. With them, your presence is defined, respected, and remembered. The discipline of boundaries is difficult at first, especially if you have lived long without them. At the beginning, people will resist. They will test you. They will push, not because they hate you, but because they are accustomed to taking. Here, the Stoic lesson bites sharp. Do not yield. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Decide who you are, then guard that decision with boundaries." You will find a curious thing happens. At first, people may withdraw when you draw lines, but those who remain, those who learn to honor your space, will respect you more deeply. They will no longer see you as convenient. They will see you as consistent, as defined, as someone whose worth cannot be negotiated. And this is when respect crystallizes into permanence. Let us pause here. Boundaries are not walls that shut the world out. They are gates that you control. You decide what enters, what stays, what leaves. That decision is the essence of freedom. To live without boundaries is to live as a servant to everyone else's whims. To live with them is to live as the master of your own presence. So carry this truth. Respect without boundaries is an illusion. It may appear for a time, but it will erode under pressure. Only when you learn to say no, to step back, to define your space, does respect deepen into something unshakable. This is where we stand now. Silence supported by boundaries, calm fortified by limits. And from here, the journey turns once again. For the final lesson lies not in how others treat you, but in how your entire life reflects your integrity. Respect is not just a response to moments, it is the mirror of your character, shining even when no one is watching. Entering the 5th chapter, we arrive at the deepest ground, respect as reflection. Not what others grant you in passing, but what life mirrors back when your actions, your choices, your integrity align. At this stage, respect is no longer a negotiation. It is not even a pursuit. It is the natural echo of the way you live. Picture this. A man walks into a room. He says little. He does not dress to impress, nor does he announce his importance. Yet somehow, people make space for him. They listen when he speaks. They notice when he moves. Why? because his life has already spoken for him. The respect he carries is not in his voice, it is in his history, in the weight of decisions made long before he entered the room. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Over time, that dye becomes visible to the world. Live in deception, and people will feel it. Live with clarity, and people will trust it. Respect that endures is not earned in single encounters. It is forged in the furnace of repeated choices. Each act of integrity leaves a mark. Each refusal to betray yourself adds weight. Eventually, you no longer need to demand respect. You embody it. I knew a man whose reputation spread before him, not because of wealth or position, but because he could not be bought. He worked in an industry filled with flattery, manipulation, and hidden deals. Many rose quickly, only to collapse when their dishonesty caught up to them. He rose slowly, steadily. People came to him not for favors, but for truth. When he gave his word, it was final. And even those who disliked him could not deny him respect. His integrity was his armor. His consistency was his crown. This is where Stoicism meets daily life. Epictetus taught, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. If you want respect, stop chasing it. Stop justifying yourself. Stop arguing for your worth. Instead, live in such a way that your actions speak louder than your defense ever could. Respect flows to those who embody their values, even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. Consider a woman who guards her promises. She tells no one of her sacrifices. She does not advertise her principles. Yet over years, people notice that she does what she says, even when inconvenient. They begin to trust her without question. When she enters the room, her presence steadies the group. This is respect not born of charm, but of quiet integrity. The Stoics knew that life is not about pleasing others, but about aligning with nature, with virtue, with truth. Seneca wrote, "A man who lives for himself lives for all." When you live authentically, without pretense, you become a beacon for others. They may not articulate it, but they feel drawn to your steadiness. You give them permission to trust, to lower their guard, to believe again in honesty. Respect becomes not just personal, it becomes communal. Think of integrity as a shadow that never leaves you. Others may not always see it in the light, but it shapes the way you move, the way you are perceived, the way you are remembered. A person without integrity casts no shadow. They walk lightly, but they are easily forgotten. A person with integrity leaves weight behind. Even in absence, they are felt. But this path is not easy. Living with integrity means losing certain battles. It means refusing shortcuts. It means turning down opportunities that glitter but corrode. It means walking away from alliances built on falsehood. Yet each refusal adds to your reservoir of respect. For when people see that you will not betray yourself, they begin to realize you will not betray them either. Here is the paradox. Respect that comes from performance fades. Respect that comes from power crumbles. Respect that comes from fear dissolves. But respect that comes from integrity endures beyond your presence. It cannot be stolen, it cannot be bought, it cannot be destroyed by rumor or slander, because it is not based on what others think of you, but on what you truly are. Let me give you one more image. Imagine a tree standing in a field through decades of storms. Its bark is scarred, its branches weathered, but its roots hold firm. People walk by and rest in its shade. They tie their horses to it. They point to it as a landmark. Why? Because it has stood, because it has endured, because its presence is trustworthy. That is integrity. That is respect as reflection. So as you carry this lesson, ask yourself, what does my life reflect? Do my actions mirror my words? Does my presence whisper of steadiness, or does it scatter like noise in the wind? Do I live in such a way that respect follows me unbidden? These questions are not burdens, they are invitations. Invitations to build a life that commands respect not by force but by nature. At this stage, respect becomes inseparable from who you are. It no longer depends on approval, applause, or recognition. It lives in the rhythm of your choices, the discipline of your silence, the firmness of your boundaries, the weight of your integrity. Respect, then, is no longer something you seek. It is something you are. And so we close this chapter with clarity. Respect is not won in a single battle, but across a lifetime of living true. It is reflection, echo, and shadow. It is the sum of choices no one applauded, of stands no one noticed, of truths no one could deny. When you live this way, you no longer wonder if people will respect you. You already carry respect within, and the world simply mirrors it back. From here, one final step remains, to see how all these lessons, consistency, words, silence, boundaries, and integrity interweave into a way of life where respect is no longer the goal, but the natural byproduct of who you have become. Every step you take toward commanding respect is a step toward honoring yourself. Remember, respect does not come from chasing approval or demanding recognition. It grows when you hold your ground with quiet strength, when you act with dignity, even in the face of challenge. What matters is not whether others see your worth immediately, but that you never stop seeing it within yourself. I would love to hear how this message connects with your own journey. The moments you have turned disrespect into composure, the times you chose to walk away with grace, or the victories you claimed simply by standing steady. Sharing those stories not only affirms your path, it also lights the way for others who are still learning to find their voice. If you are not sure what to write, simply comment, "Stand tall." Let it be your declaration that you are ready to live with intention and strength. If today's reflection spoke to you, I invite you to subscribe so these lessons will always be close when you need them most. Not as a demand, but as an open door for you to keep growing alongside voices that share the same pursuit of wisdom and self-mastery. As you leave this session, carry this truth with you. Respect begins inside. When you treat yourself with worth, the world will follow. Walk with calm confidence, speak with intention, set your boundaries with courage, and remember, the next lesson is waiting. We will go even deeper into the art of shaping presence so that no circumstance, no voice, and no doubt can take your strength away.